Hello, is my mic on? Is my mic on? Is my mic on? It says I have audio louder. You want it louder? Checking, checking, checking. One, two, three. Check, check, check. Let me look. That's the back of my head. Okay, so audio, mic. It says I have audio, but I can turn it way up. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Am I super loud? Am I overdriven? Is that better? Mic, mic, mic. How's that? Better? Yeah, there I am. Okay, yeah, I was just explaining to you guys a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't hear me say. So the reason we're going live right now is I have a webinar, the beef canning webinar, and part of doing a good job on webinars is not doing that at the beginning of the webinar where you have no audio. So I've been working on this webinar since 7 in the morning, on and off, like not super, balls to the wind sort of thing, but getting the kitchen reconfigured. I've got this high table right here so you can see me work. This isn't usually in my kitchen, and it is what it is, right? But you just knocked that over. And Tactical's my cameraman and needs to look at how this is all set up. He's also responsible for moving that camera when we need to come in close and see things. So he's looking at the computer and can see your comments. I'm not, but do go all caps if you've got something to say. The other thing I like to do before a canning webinar is pre-can some stuff so I can show you what it looks like at the end. I'll be actually starting a canner right before right as the webinar starts that I will pull out before the webinar ends. So that's going to be fun. If you haven't signed up for the webinar and want to, that's LivingFreeinTennessee.com/canning. It's going to be a big group of people, guys. This partnership with John's been really cool. Definitely we've like doubled our size for the webinar, which is nice, and it means a whole bunch more people are going to be equipped to can beef if the prices drop and fall, which we think they're going to. So but it's kind of funny because people kind of think webinars you just jump in front of the computer and do it, right? And that is what it is, and it takes an hour or two. No, I've put about 4 hours in today, and that's nothing that I'm complaining about, but it takes a lot of time, and that's separate from preparing the materials. So any comments, questions? Can you hear me when I walk over here? What? Oh, they can't see? That's true. Yeah, you have to pick it up and do this. Well, that's why I need you for 2 hours on a webinar, because I don't have a different guys who have recommendations for webinar cameras. Yeah, send that my way because it does suck. Yeah, well, anyway, one more piece can fit in there. This one goes in the fridge. So I did defrost the beef from the freezer this morning. My mom was like, "Where are you going to get the beef to can?" I was like, "Out of the freezer," and then it's going to make room in my freezer, which will be kind of nice, So I could have a cooking show. I probably will have a cooking show one day. I keep wanting to do dinner for one, and now I think, we have garden 30. I think we're going to do dinner 30 because, some sort of 30 related to eating healthy, living healthy is in order. So is what it is. This Pyrex dish that I use to measure 4 cups at a time. I've had this since the early 90s. I bought it in Ashland, Oregon at the Buy Right. At the time, it was $10, and I thought that was a lot of money. And now it's not the 90s anymore, and I still have this Pyrex thing, and I'm still using it all the time. It's like my favorite pitcher for pouring water. It's so funny how that works. Vinegar is your friend when you're canning, right? So, yeah, so I wanted to have some product to show people. I have a really fun product to show people today, too. Look at this. I did pickled okra. It was kind of cool. Yesterday, a friend came over to chat, and I was like, "You can come over and chat, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putzing around doing my usual Saturday stuff." And he's like, "That's cool." So he stopped in the afternoon, right as I was sitting down to snap beans. And so I was at the dining room table, and I said, I was like, "Well, sit down, and do you want anything to drink?" and all the things that you say to people. And he sat down, and then he's like, "You want me to help you snap beans?" And I was like, "Sure, help me snap beans," right? And we had them done so fast. It's so funny how two people working on processing food, it's more than a doubling. It's like a tripling of how fast you are. Which one? The big silver one or the electric one in the back? Actually, I'll just answer both. This is a Presto pressure canner. I don't have the lid out yet, but it's what I have used for 15 years. And it was $60 when I got it. They're probably near $100 now, I would imagine. Biggest one I could get at the time. And I got it because the All-American was $200 at the time. And that was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. So I ended up just getting the Presto, and I was like, I'll upgrade to the All-American someday. Guess what, guys? Someday still hasn't come, and it's been 15 years. The Presto still works. I replaced the gasket once, the rubber gasket that goes around the top, just on spec. It didn't necessarily need it, but what you don't want to do is find that out on the weekend when you have 1,000 pounds of corn to do, right? So, see, this is where I have to look at my time cheat sheet. I have this really awesome cheat sheet that I have for all the things I can, because I don't remember the times, and I never want to make that mistake where I don't do enough time. So yeah, I've used this thing for 15 years and it's held up fine. It's not as good as the All-American. I've used the All-American one. What's cool about the All-American one is you don't have a rubber gasket to wear out. You use Vaseline around the rim. It's a weighted gauge pressure canner instead of a dial gauge pressure canner. So that's pretty cool too. I think they make both though. The one I used was weighted gauge, and weighted gauge is cool because it just holds it at that pressure rather than me needing to monitor a dial the whole time. But for me at the time, the expense was an issue. And so last year I was like, I know, I'll finally break down, put some money aside, and I'll get that All-American. And they're like $500 now. And I was like, screw it. The Presto works. In fact, when people get into canning and then get tired of canning, you know what they do? They give me their Prestos. So I have like 3 Prestos or 4 Prestos here. I have somebody who just moved to the area and wants to start canning. And I'm like, use one of these Prestos for a year and then worry about getting your canner if you like it. Because what I see happening a lot is people are like, I want a can. And they're like, wow, I hate canning. Well, why not learn that on some free equipment, right? So anyway, but yeah, getting ready for a webinar takes way more time than anybody thinks. Like I'll be going straight through from now till 4 o'clock when we launch. Oh, Prestos are 140 now. See, but they're not 540. So it just depends on your budget. I saw a Presto I used All-American on Facebook Marketplace for 100, but I didn't get it. Somebody else scooped that in. So that is what it is. What are you typing? You guys trolling me? Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't put salt in these. Excuse me. See, that's what happens when I go live. I forget important stuff. Now, you can can these without salt, but I'll be so much happier later if I put salt in those. So I keep my Morton's kosher salt in a jar because I live in the South. And you know what happens in the South? It gets humid. You know what happens when it gets humid? Your salt turns into a brick if you don't have it really well sealed. So anyway. So these are my 2 sample ones for later when it's been canned. And then I'll have another set that goes in at the beginning of the canning webinar. And then we're going to talk about food safety, supplies you need for canning, botulism in particular. I'm going to talk a little bit about the beef shortage thing that might happen. And we're not taking this from a panic standpoint. We're taking this for a buy the dip, man. You know how John Bush always says buy the dip in Bitcoin? Let's buy the dip in beef if it goes down, and you can can it, and you don't even have to buy a freezer. You do have to buy mason jars. We'll talk a little bit about where to source mason jars if you go to the store and they're not there, and lids and rings. And then we're going to talk about how to pressure can beef safely, step by step, 2 methods. I'm going to show, of course, these 2 canners. We'll have this one going when we start. I'm going to actually use the stovetop as the demo for the class. It will probably not be done by the time the class is over, but that's okay. I can do a follow-up video or something on that at some point and just send it out to the attendees, because otherwise what you're doing is you're waiting for 75 minutes and then you're waiting for another 45 minutes while the thing cools. But we're going stepwise with safety in mind, because a lot of people are afraid of pressure canning because of horror stories they've heard. And it's just, once you've done it a few times, you're like, okay. I mean, I respect the pressure, man, and I respect the heat, but once it's been demystified, I think it's a lot less scary for people. And then I'm going to talk about how to store your canned foods. Next month, I think so I'm on the fence about next month's topic, but I think I'm going to talk about how to it's like some dishes you can cook with beef. They're delicious. And probably from the standpoint both of fresh and from the jar, and things you can do with it. So it'll be more like a cooking class, but at the same time, it might be a good time for me to talk about fermenting, because in August, like towards the end of August, is when I will do the next webinar or digital workshop. It's also a really good time in September to start your sauerkrauts and some of your ferments, because it cools down a little bit, and that's better for the better environment for fermentation. So I'm up in the air about what topics. I'll probably send a survey out. What's the question? Yeah. You can can venison too. I have most of last fall's venison left in my fridge still that we need to eat. I mean, not my fridge, my freezer. If it had been in there for a year in the fridge, that would have stunk. Anyway, I'm really excited about the webinar. How many of you are going who are on here? Are you going to answer me on my computer? Never mind. Hey, Tactical, can you practice getting that camera from there over to here? This is what we're doing. We're basically like, are we going to look like idiots? This is your cable. This is all you've got. So up and over. How far can you get if you're holding it? Yeah. Here, hand it to me. There's my problem. So we go, woo! Look, you can look inside the canner just barely. How's that look? Yeah, so if we're going to look inside at what things look like, that's good. Okay. That was my hammy look. Yeah. Anyway, I'm excited. We've done the AV check. Is the audio good or is it sketchy, guys? That's what I want to know. Can you hear me drinking my water? That's probably really annoying. Is the audio good? Can you hear me blowing into the mic? All the mistakes that people make. Okay, cool. I'm curious about the electric canner in the corner. I only ever use water mat. Oh yeah, this is a pressure canner, and not all pressure cookers are pressure canners. We'll talk about that in the class, but there are two primary products on the market now for pressure canners. Three actually. One is so old and not worth buying that I don't buy it. But this I've been using for years. It's Carry is the brand, but now it's Nesco pressure canner. Make sure it's a canner if you're going to get it. And then it does pressure canning, and they're awesome. If like I've been kind of tired a little bit this month, and sometimes canning projects go late into the night for me. And when I feel like I'm not going to pay good attention to the dial gauge, I can do bigger batches in the dial gauge, so I'm just done in one batch. But if it's just 2 batches in the electric, because I can only do 4 jars at a time, and in the electric I can do, depending if it's quarts, I can do 7 quarts. If it's pints, I can do 14 pints in here because I can layer them. So I can knock everything out in one batch there if I have a lot, more so than the Carry pressure canner or the Nesco pressure canner. Presto makes one too. They do 5 quarts in the Presto. Presto's the one I'd like. It's about $389 right now, and they go out of stock on the regular. But it's awesome because I can, like, I just put the jars in here, program the time and hit go, and it's going to can everything for me. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to re-examine the setup because I've got like the meat defrosted. It's being held at 40 degrees here so it doesn't go bad. So I'm going to throw some ice in there to keep it cool now that it's defrosted, and I have the sous vide going and circulating. And then we're going to go back through some AV stuff because what Tactical doesn't realize is we're going to be flipping between a PowerPoint and me and a PowerPoint and me. So that's going to be a little extra step that we get to do. I might just set up a second access computer, but we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I have another Mac in here. My uncle gave me a computer he didn't want anymore, so I'm stoked. Yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining. If you haven't signed up for the webinar, LivingFreeinTennessee.com/canning. If you are an LFTM member, check your email for a different link. See ya for